Hello and welcome to the science class. My name is Teacher John. I'm going to take you through Science Primary 5. We are winding our Primary 5 Term 2 as we prepare for Term 3. And I think this is likely to be the last lesson. In our previous lesson, we looked at solutes. And we said a solute is a substance that dissolves in a solvent, while a solvent is a liquid that dissolves a solute, and a solution is a mixture of a solute and a solvent. Then today we are going to look at methods of separating mixtures. Methods of separating mixtures. Now we have different methods of separating mixtures, and one we have what called filtration method. One is filtration. Filtration method. Number two, we have what we call decantation. Decantation method. Then number three, we have what we call winnowing. Number four, we have what we call using a separating funnel. Using a separating funnel. Number five, we have what we call flotation method. Flotation method. Number six, we have what you call using a magnet. Number seven, we have distillation method. Then lastly, number eight, we have what we call hand picking or sorting. Hand picking, also known as sorting. So these are the methods of separating mixtures. We have filtration method, decantation method, winnowing using a separating funnel, flotation method using a magnet, distillation method, and lastly hand picking or sorting. Hand picking or sorting, also known as hand picking or sorting. So those are the methods of separating mixtures. We are going to look at one by one. So we begin by looking at filtration. Filtration is going to be our first method. Filtration method. Now, filtration is the process of separating solid particles from a liquid using a filter. It's the process of separating solid particles. Filtration is the process of separating solid particles. Filtration is the process of separating solid particles, separating solid particles from a liquid using a filter, solid particles from a liquid using a filter. Filtration is the process of separating solid particles from a liquid using a filter. So a filter is a filter is I've said filtration is a process of separating solid particles from a liquid using a filter. Then I was saying a filter is a structure that helps to separate solid particles from a liquid. Examples of filters, we have filter paper, a piece of cloth, and so on. We can use them to separate solid particles from a liquid, and that's why we call them filters. So the solid particles that remain on a filter are called residue, and the liquid that passes through a filter is called a filtrate. So, we said a filter is a structure that separates a filter is a structure a filter is a structure that separates a filter is a structure that separates solid particles from a liquid. A filter is a structure that separates solid particles from a liquid. Then we have examples of filters. Examples of filters. Example of filters, we have filter paper and a piece of cloth can be a filter. Example of filters, we have one, filter paper. Number two, we have piece of cloth. Filter paper and a piece of cloth. So these are examples of filters. So when we use a filter paper or a piece of cloth to separate solid particles from liquid particles, that method is called filtration. The method is called filtration. The solid particles that remain on a filter are called residue. NB. The solid particles that remain the solid particles that remain on the filter are called residue. The solid particles that remain on the filter are called residue. I repeat, the solid particles that remain on the filter are called residue. Then the liquid that passes through the filter are called, we call that liquid filtrate. The liquid that passes through the filter are called is called filtrate. The liquid that passes through the filter is called filtrate. As simple as that. So there's a difference between filtrate and residue. Residue are the solid particles that remain on the filter. You looked at examples of filters. We have filter paper, piece of cloth. We even have a sieve. You can add the number 3. Sieve. A sieve. So examples of filters: filter paper, piece of cloth. Then we have a sieve. Like for example, if you prepare tea and you can use a sieve to separate tea leaves from tea. So those tea leaves will remain on the sieve, and the tea leaves will be called residue. Then the tea that passes through the sieve, we shall refer to it as filtrate. Those who blend juice, after blending the juice, you have to filter. You can either use a sieve or a piece of cloth. So when you pour the remains on a sieve, the liquid which passes through, the juice that passes through, is filtrate. The seeds that remain on the sieve are called residue. As simple as that. So we are going to draw a diagram to show filtration. We're going to draw a diagram showing filtration method. Filtration. Filtration method. That's a diagram showing filtration. This one is a funnel. This is a funnel. This one is a funnel. The word funnel is written like this, double N. Funnel. This one is residue. This one is filter paper. Filter paper. Filter paper. Residue funnel, then this one is called filtrate. So we said a filter separates solid particles from liquid. Then the residue are the solid particles that remain on the filter paper. Then the red filtrate is a liquid that passes through the filter paper or the filter. So this liquid is called filtrate. This is the funnel. The solid particles which remain there are called residue. Then, how is filtration method useful? How can filtration method be applied in our homes? How filtration method can be applied? How can we apply this method in our homes? How filtration method can be applied in our homes. How filtration method can be applied in our homes. How filtration method can be applied in our homes. So filtration method can be applied in our homes in different ways. One, when separating fruit juice from seeds. When separating fruit juice, from seeds. When separating fruit juice from seeds. When separating clear water from muddy water. When separating clear water from muddy water. When separating clear water from muddy water. Then also when separating tea leaves from tea. When separating tea leaves from tea. Those are different ways we can use filtration method. Number 3, here we can say when separating tea leaves from tea. When separating tea leaves from tea. So when you separate tea leaves from tea, you get what we call, when you separate tea leaves from tea, you get what we call filtrate, which is tea. So those are different ways we can apply filtration method in our homes. That's how we can apply filtration method in our homes. Next we look at using a separating funnel. 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 Now, using a separating funnel, this method can be used to separate oil from water or water from oil. So it is a method used to separate liquids that cannot mix. So we shall say this is a method used to separate oil from water. Oil from water, or you can say this is a method. This is a method used to separate liquids that cannot mix. And liquids which cannot mix are called immiscible liquids. Liquids that cannot mix are called immiscible liquids. And B, liquids that cannot mix are called immiscible. Immiscible liquids. Immiscible liquids. Liquids that cannot mix are called immiscible liquids. Liquids that cannot mix are called immiscible liquids. Then those ones which can mix are called miscible liquids. And for example, we have oil and water. Oil and water are examples of immiscible liquids, liquids which cannot mix. So we can separate oil from water using a separating funnel. We can separate oil from water I've said we can separate oil from water using a method called using a separating funnel. Water and oil. Water and oil can be separated. water and oil can be separated using a separating funnel. Using a separating funnel. Water and oil can be separated using a separating funnel. So we have this method here. A separating funnel. A separating funnel, here it looks like. Some of these things are not in your booklet, but you must know them. They are very important. That's oil, then that's water. So this separating funnel has a knob which we can use to close and open. So this one is called knob. Then so you open. After opening, the one that is at the bottom will be collected first. Then after collecting, you put another container and you also collect that one. So this is what we call a separating funnel. So because oil floats on water, you should know that water is denser than oil, or oil is less dense than water. That's why you see oil on top. Then you see water at the bottom. So that means that water will float, now oil will float on water, that's why water is at the bottom. So the liquid at the bottom, which is water, will be collected first. Then after you are done collecting, you remove the container and put another container, and you also collect this liquid we are calling oil. It's as simple as that. So this is what we call a separating funnel. It is used to separate liquids that cannot mix. Decantation method. So decantation method is a method where of separating solid particles from liquid particles, whereby solid particles are allowed to settle at the bottom, then the liquid is poured off separately, and solid particles will be left at the bottom. So you can say this is a method of separating solid particles from liquid, where the solid particles settle at the bottom, settle at the bottom of a container So we are saying decantation method is a method of separating solid particles from a liquid where the solid particles settle at the bottom of a container. Then the liquid is poured. The liquid is poured gently into another container. Then the liquid is poured gently into another container. So that is how decantation takes place. This method, it's used to separate solid particles from liquids. Then we find that the solid particles will settle at the bottom of a container. Then the liquid is then poured gently into another container, leaving the solid particles at the bottom of the other container. So we want to draw some diagrams to show decantation method. This container here shows a mixture of solid particles and a liquid. Mixture of solid particles and a liquid. Then this other diagram is showing solid particles solid particles at the bottom. Solid particles at the bottom of a container. So, the first container shows a mixture of solid particles and a liquid. Then when you leave this water and when you leave this mixture for some few hours, you find that the solid particle will settle at the bottom, then the clear water will remain at the top. So you're supposed to pour this clear water gently into another container to get clean water. You're going to draw another one here. So we have these solid particles at the bottom of this container, then clear water being poured into another container. So you find that the clear water will remain at the bottom. No, solid particles remain at the bottom. Solid particles at the bottom of a container. So these solid particles are at the bottom of a container, then clear water is being poured into another container. So this method shows a decantation method. This method is called decantation. Then you also need to know that the solid particles that remain at the bottom of the container are called residue, and the the solid particles that remain, at the bottom of a container are called residue. So those solid particles that remain at the bottom of the container, we shall call them residue. Then how can decantation method be applied at home? We can use it to separate fruit juice from seeds. We can also use it to separate clear water from muddy water. So lastly, we look at how decantation can be used, or how can decantation be applied at home. I think we shall look at how decantation can be applied at home in our next lesson. In our next lesson, we shall look at how decantation can be applied at home. Then, after that, we look at what we call a distillation method. Otherwise, thank you so much for being attentive in my lesson. May the Almighty God bless you abundantly.